This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride. So if not already, like, subscribe, follow along, do what you gotta do to not miss an episode.
At time of recording, we've rolled into a brand new year, a time often seen as a fresh start. Today, we're joined by Galnoosh Namazi, an avid adventure motorcyclist based in Terrace, British Columbia, whose life story resonates with the essence of a dual sport adventure. Just as a dual sport bike confronts and adapts to varied terrains, G's journey through life reflects a similar adaptability. Her experiences are a testament to navigating through life's paved paths and its rough, plus her willingness to explore less traveled trails with equal dexterity and enthusiasm. In this episode, you'll gain valuable takeaways. G shares the importance of gripping the handlebars of your life firmly. Just as a motorcyclist must make active decisions on the road, in life, we must take accountability for our choices and the direction we're heading. She also inspires us with her willingness to confront and overcome challenges. It's about viewing each challenge not as a roadblock, but as an opportunity for growth and learning. This is the Motivation. Well, I am stoked because you are our first guest after our longest hiatus.
That's
of the
right.
Podcast. I swear we weren't just sitting around being fucking lazy. We were riding.
Yeah.
I blame motorcycles. But you are a British Columbian that has been celebrated by so many around the globe now through your platforms, through your fearlessness in adventure riding. But I know that your journey is really one that had so much inspiration from your parents and your childhood and making this huge move. So share with people where you're from and when you came over to Canada and what that experience looked like.
And whenever I get this question, I think it's kind of funny because like I feel like that was so long ago for me in kind of like the trajectory of my life, but it does still kind of play such a big role in who I am. So I came to Canada when I was 6 years old. I was born in Iran. It was a decision that like my mom mostly made. It wasn't even really my dad. He didn't really want to move, but my mom, being kind of similar to me with her personality, she kind of had this vision of like, if I had a daughter and she's anything like me, she would not like growing up in Iran. So she was like, we need to get out of here. Like, I think that was probably one of the most authentic things she's done in her life, where like she just had this calling that she was like, we need to get out now. And so it wasn't like we were like refugees or anything. It wasn't like that. Like there wasn't any real political motivation to move out. But I think anybody from that part of the world knows that like the politics in that region just plays into who you are, whether you want to play into that or not. For her, you know, she was a bit of a tomboy growing up. She had like all these interests that she never felt like she got to pursue because they just weren't opportunities you would have as a girl growing up in Iran. And so not to say there aren't really cool things happening in Iran for women now, but I think when she was, you know, growing up and like when I was a kid, right, that was a lot different than even it is now. So that was kind of how we came to Canada, and we settled in Vancouver, and I spent most of my life growing up there. And then 5 years ago, I moved up to Terrace, which is like this little town in northern BC. Have you guys ever been up here or no?
No. It looks amazing. I have been north, like I've ended up in Yukon before for work, but that's about like the closest that I've gone. Like I've never had the chance to traverse that part of British Columbia at all.
Because how far of a drive is it from here?
Like 14 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Just
a quick, just a hop, skip. Gotcha.
You've written it down here, haven't you?
Yeah, a few times. And like, I'll do it in one go. And it's like, oh man, like the next day I'm like hungover from the driving or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you should totally come up here. Like, I'd love to do like a group ride with you ladies. I know a few of you have talked about coming up and doing like the ferry and stuff. That'd be super cool. So
We have now.
Yeah.
yeah, there you go.
We're coming on
This is
board.
the conversation. This is
Here we
how
go.
it really
Guys,
starts.
this is no
Glad
longer a
to see you.
podcast. We're now solely doing trip planning.
Love it.
It's coming along.
Yeah, that
for
would
the
be
ride.
amazing though. That would be absolutely incredible.
Do you have any siblings or was it just yourself?
I'm an only child. Yeah.
Oh, really? Hey.
I
Mhm.
love how much though your mom took that initiative because I can't imagine, especially when you think of like, okay, 6 years old. I'm not exactly sure how old you are, but at that point in time, coming to a new country and starting a new life, it's not like you could go on the internet or check an Instagram geo hashtag to see what your life would be like. That's an overwhelming choice.
Yeah, I think she actually saw like the Vancouver airport on TV and she was like, that was like the trigger. Like, that's what
She's like, I'm in.
yeah,
That's
she's
beautiful.
like, that looks cool. Let's go.
Well, it really was so much, it sounds like that intuition, you know, that kind of like knowing that like there's more out there, there's something different, and then going with that gut feeling.
Yeah, no, totally. And I remember like it sounds like it was like very like, okay, let's go. But I remember there were, like so many months of just like legal processes that they had to go through. Like they had to go to Turkey for a month. And I remember like staying with my aunt I was like 4 years old and like she just took care of me for the month that they had to go to Turkey
Wow.
and do their like immigration stuff. So yeah, it was definitely like a very arduous process. And I remember them coming here with like almost nothing after selling everything they had and like bringing the money over. The exchange rate was just like bad then as it is now. But yeah, like it is kind of mind blowing to me, like when I think about that, and maybe it kind of informs some of the split second decision making I make nowadays. 100%. Is like they did that and they got it, so I can do this.
I can do Terrace. I can.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I also moved here and I knew nobody, so I think definitely that same thinking where I was like, well, they did that really hard thing. How bad could this be, kind of thing.
Obviously, you've lived this adventurous life, and we're going to kind of get into your riding story because I know, especially getting into the adventure riding community, there's definitely an impactful tale to be told there. But have you ever felt almost an internal pressure at all to live everything so fully? And how do you navigate that, if so?
That is actually like, I think the driving force behind my adventurousness. I struggle with it a little bit because I try and not let it control me fully because I do want to be my own person and I don't want this sacrifice that my parents made to kind of define who I am. But at the same time, I am very grateful that they did that. And I realized that I would have been a very different person if they hadn't. I think on some level, I let it inform this like sense of gratitude that I wake up with every morning, that like I get to live this life because of this one sacrifice that somebody made for me that I didn't really understand at the time. But at the same time, I do have to like take a step back sometimes and be like, no, like if I do things, I do it for myself. And if that makes my parents proud, then that's great. But I do have a sense of responsibility to myself to just live for me. So it's a bit of a balancing act, I think. Like I do still struggle with it a little bit, but I try and kind of take the positives and leave the negatives. But it's hard.
It's hard, but at the same time, it's shaped exactly who you are. I think it's so great kind of when we look back at, even if it's a struggle for us to balance those experiences, you're kind of like, man, without that, I wouldn't be who I am. Like it truly does make up the fabric of who you are. Obviously, you mentioned your mom had this zest and all these ambitions of what she would have wanted to do. You come here, you grow up, and you're kind of like, I'm going to live full throttle. I'm going to twist a throttle. So when does that itch come into play?
I have to credit guys that I dated for getting me into motorcycling. Nobody in my family really rode motorcycles. Like I remember sitting on my uncle's dirt bike as a kid, but that was pretty much my entire experience with motorcycles. But 10 years ago or whatever, I dated a lot of guys that had motorcycles. That makes it sound wrong. No, I didn't date a lot of guys.
No, be proud. Do you, girl? I was like, no, girl. Yeah. I was
the
like,
guys that I did date all
they were lucky to date you. Let's be clear.
You can edit that.
We've all, well, no, you haven't. I was like, I've had my rounds. And I was like, you haven't. I'm like, no, you haven't. No, Chrissy, one guy.
By accident.
Yeah.
Gavin's a sweetie. No, but yeah, so I dated dudes that rode motorcycles. I would be on the back, never really a huge amount of interest to get on one myself. But then eventually it kind of was like, I don't want to wait for people to take me for rides. I just want to go and be able to do that myself. And originally I wanted a cruiser. I just wanted to like look cool cruising down the street. And then I got I think it was a GL 550. So it's like a bit of a taller bike, and the seat was wider. And I just remember being like very tippy-toed, which is like not an ideal starting position on a bike.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so I ended up getting the Honda Rebel, and that really helped build up my confidence. And then like I've never actually been a super outdoorsy person up until like maybe 10-12 years ago. That kind of started happening for me. So in a way, the adventure riding was how I combined the outdoorsy with the motorcycling, and that's how I got into that. So
How did you start that connection with the outdoors?
So I did a thing and I lost my license. Like my
Tell me
What was
more.
the thing?
No, tell me more.
Yeah.
This is a safe space for everyone
Tell me more.
listening.
Tell me all about it now.
It's just between you and us.
Yeah, and so I lost my license, had to walk everywhere. So I was like taking the bus. So I'd like walk from my house to the bus. And I noticed how the walking was really good for my mental health. Like I was just in a really tough space at the time mentally, and walking just seemed to make me feel better. So I was like, this is great doing it on the side of the road to get to the bus stop. But what if I like did this on a trail? Like,
What if I did this just because?
yeah, like imagine if I just
chose
went
it.
out and did this.
Yeah.
And so I lived in North Van at the time, and it was really close to get to trails and stuff. So I just started exploring like the local trails, like the BCMC and stuff. And then I got a job working at Grouse one year, and so I was like almost like a nature guide type thing. And
You made a leap. You went from like walking to the bus and being like, this is kind of good for my mental health, to like a nature guide.
Yeah, well, like it took a few years, but yeah, like I started reading a lot and just learning about like plants and animals and stuff. And then the job at Grouse opened up, and I went for it while I was going to school. And then yeah, I kind of started getting into like snowboarding and just like anything outdoors. I was like, yeah, let's go. This makes me feel good. Kind of just snowballed from there.
You really, it seems like it followed the breadcrumbs quite instinctively and quickly almost. You started riding in 2015, and you've really become in its own right a little bit of like a face for, especially in British Columbia, women riders of off-roading riding sort of thing within the the quick 8 years. And just what you've even spoke to of like, yeah, it was good for my mental health, and I just started doing it more in bigger ways. Has that always been a part of who you've been? It seems like you really are always at a state of listening and then going forward with that.
I think it definitely is now, for sure. I've actually never thought of it like that, like following the breadcrumbs. I think it's someone that I've grown into more in the last 10 years or so. But growing up, I don't think I was that person. I think I was a bit of like a follower. Like I did like the things that my friends were doing, and I never really thought too hard to explore what I wanted to do. Like it was just like, well, everyone's doing this, so let's do this. I think maybe like that deep unhappiness that I felt at the time when I lost my license and like some other things in my life were shifting, that probably triggered me to just do things differently. Like you can't expect to do the same things and get different results kind of mentality. That's interesting. Like I never thought of it like that I kind of am this person that like goes like, oh, well, let's see where this goes. And then I kind of just follow it. Like it's kind of what I do on my bike, actually. I like find a road and I'm like, I wonder where this goes. And I'm like,
yeah.
Well, and I'm curious because you say you were going through a lot of things at one time. And then plus, I mean, losing a license, no matter how it happened, whether it was through something you did or not, like it's a massive inconvenience in your life, especially if you were living, in North Van at the time. It's not necessarily easy to get around.
it would be very easy. Like those are those moments in life where you are faced with a choice, whether you're conscious of it or not, to either lean in and go victim mentality and all of this is happening to me and woe is me and life is shit and just get into a darker hole, or take steps to dig out of it. I know you're saying, you know, I went for this walk and it felt good, so I leaned into that. But were there any other tools that you used, or that when you reflect on that time really helped you create positive shift in your life?
Yeah, I think like that mentality comes with like some other things too, where you're just in a space where you're really accepting responsibility for your life, and you're accepting like a internal locus of control over things, and you're like, no, everything I'm doing is either a conscious choice that I've made in the past or that I'm making currently, and these things are not being done to me, they are happening because I've made those decisions. I definitely shifted my perspective in that sense, and I kind of just was like, no, we got ourselves into this, we're going to get ourselves out of this kind of thing. And that is kind of something I think about anytime I am riding my bike somewhere new and desolate, and I'm like, am I gonna like have a mechanical failure, am I gonna get like mauled by a grizzly bear, like what's gonna happen?
Casual mullet.
Like, yeah. Yeah, or like, am I gonna drop the bike and not be able to like pick it up or something? Like, yeah, definitely. Like, I think the idea of just accepting that you are responsible for your situation, good or bad. It's nice because when good things happen to you, you feel equally responsible, and you're like, no, I did that, right? But it also comes with the responsibility of when bad things happen to you, you're like, no, I did that too, and what can we learn from this and take away from it so we can do better next time? Yeah, I think it also, that mentality also came with like a sense of like understanding and forgiveness for myself when I do make those mistakes. I'm a lot more kind to myself now, because I'm like, even though you do things that are kind of messed up sometimes, you do some pretty cool things sometimes that lead to your happiness as well. So yeah, I think it's like just accepting the duality of that and kind of running with it a little bit.
Where do you kind of hope or foresee this taking you? Because it sounds like it was a huge shift over the last 8 years.
Yeah, like it sounds like I've got my shit together, but like it's a daily thing where I'm like having these processes in my head.
Absolutely.
So some days are better than others, and some days I feel like I'm doing a better job of being my authentic self than others, and some days it's just like, no, I have a day job, I have a desk job, I have like all these other responsibilities, and I just need to like get through them. So right now I'm actually in like a kind of interesting point in my life where I've kind of set myself up the way that I thought I wanted to be set up. And now I'm like, actually, I don't know if this is working so much, because I don't feel like I have that sense of balance that I was craving. And slowly I'm kind of losing sight of that a little bit. So I feel like I need to make another shift, and it's kind of exciting because I'm trying to set myself up for it. But I have become really interested in like motorcycle content marketing, and just how I can be a part of that as a Canadian woman in adventure riding, because it is a bit of a niche. Like you mentioned, like I'm a bit of a face, and like whether that is the case or not, I think it's partly because there just aren't that many of us, so it's not like much of an accomplishment. But yeah, I think I've become interested in that aspect of it, which like 10 years ago I never would have seen myself going into marketing. Like that just thought would not have crossed my mind. But now it's interesting to me. I have connections in the industry that I would leverage, and I see an opportunity there to do something that I've never done before, and it kind of scares the crap out of me. But I'm like, I've done hard things in the past, so I can figure this out. It's again that mentality of like, you know, taking control over, and I sound very controlling, don't I? But taking control.
I hear you saying accountability, not, you know, it's not control. It's that understanding that it's like we have so much more choice in this life than we're led to believe. And when you recognize that, it's exceptionally empowering. And so like, we don't hear, or I could think I can
No,
speak for
not at
Chrissy,
all.
is that I don't hear you speaking to controlling your life. I think it's that like choice to expand on my life. And like you said, one of the reasons that I think that you're a great influence within that community, and all communities kind of think, especially in the riding world, is that like, I'm scared shitless and I'm doing it anyways. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to land, figuratively and literally speaking. Like when you said, like, I could get mauled by a bear, I may not pick up my bike, I don't know if this is the route for me, but it's that thing of constantly stepping into this unknown space, one that you know, like you said, years ago wasn't even on the radar. But it's that constantly saying, I'll figure it out. I'll figure it out. And even when I fail and fall, I'll get back up and then I'll figure it out. And sometimes it'll work out great, and that's, you know, wonderful too. But I hear empowerment, I hear choice, I don't hear control. And I think that's ultimately what, you know, we're all trying to figure out in this life.
Well, and I think the beauty of your deep listening, like that, without a doubt, is clearly a skill that you've really honed. And it doesn't sound like you're someone, even though there may be mental wrestles day to day, that you fight on it too much. And that is a really valuable skill. It's one, like, if anyone's been listening, even for me over the last year and a half, it's like I was in that state, and then you almost forget those pieces of yourself sometimes. And then when you do recognize this lack of alignment, where you're like, oh, I thought this was going to feel like me, it doesn't. Now what do I do with that? And once again, you're with the choice of like, do I double down because this is what a story I told myself that I was to fulfill, or do I blow it the fuck up again and then figure it out? And those are all really scary choices to make, right? But like, the reward's on the other side, and the reward really is whether it works out beautifully and you ride into the sunset or not. It's because you dared to try in the first place.
The whole blowing up thing, like I blow things up all the time, and I'm like, nope, let's just start from scratch.
I love that though. You know, we kind of didn't really touch on how you got into adventure riding, but I was curious because, like, in your origin story of riding, we left you on the Rebel there. And so when did you kind of make that switch? Obviously, you know, from your story, it's clearly because you married this love of the outdoors and realized you can enjoy both at the same time. But at what point were you kind of like, screw the cool cruiser, like, I don't need to have an imagery thing, I'm going to be the badass in the adventure in the wilderness?
I wish I could say it was like my own idea, but again, at the time I was dating a guy that rode an adventure bike. And so we would go on like camping trips, and I'd take my Rebel down like these gravel roads, and he'd just be like miles ahead of me, and I'd be like puttering along. And so I realized like I need a different bike. And my first adventure bike was an F650 GS BMW. So it was like the 800 cc twin adventure bike, that kind of like the most popular adventure bike, more or less. I think it's actually the 1200 that's the most popular, but the 800 is just kind of like the smaller version, very low to the ground, kind of beginner friendly. And even sitting on that for the first time, I felt like it was a very tall bike. Like, adventure bikes are typically pretty tall. But eventually it just kind of became more natural, and I did some like off-road training as well, and that really helped. But yeah, just kind of dropping my bike a lot and practicing on like different terrain, and being very open to messing up royally sometimes and learning from it.
And that was all here in the Lower Mainland then, right?
Mostly, yeah, or like the island, or like, yeah, southern BC kind of thing. Yeah.
So at what point were you like, let's go north?
So I did a road trip to Haida Gwaii one year with this same boyfriend, not on bikes. We were in a car. And I traveled through this area for the first time in my life. And I'd never been like north of Cache Creek kind of thing. So it was like, when we went north, we went like really north for like the first time. And I remember actually driving through Terrace the first time and being like, this is such an ugly town. Who would live here? And we went to Haida Gwaii. I met a girl there who had done a semester through UBC, like for like, it was like a 5-course semester on Haida Gwaii, just learning about like natural resource management. And then I was going to school at the time, and I looked into what it would take to do this program. And then I ended up doing the program. So I lived on Haida for like 4 months over the winter. I think it was 2016 or 17, that would have been. So just got into motorcycling, left the bike down in Vancouver, flew up there, got a place for 4 months, did the school, met a ton of very cool people. And it was honestly the people that made me want to live here, because I was like, they're just, I don't know, there's a vibe up here where people are very self-sufficient. They're very like community oriented, and they're just hardy people. Like they just like get her done. And I didn't feel like that was me at the time at all. And I kind of aspired to be more like them, because it just, I don't know, being independent is something that I value deeply now. And at the time I felt like I was longing to have that. And so yeah, just meeting these people and realizing that a big part of why they're like that is because of the remoteness of the places that they live, and how they have to put these skills together to make their lives happen and function. That kind of inspired me to want to live in a small community. And then I came back, finished my bachelor's at SFU, and then kind of started applying for jobs all over BC in small towns. And then ironically landed in Terrace and was like, remember that town that was really ugly? Let's just go anyways.
Yeah. You're really selling it for us to come down and visit. I'm so glad you mentioned all these things.
It has gotten a lot better in the last 5 years, but also like the mountains have been here for thousands of years. And like the Simshan people used to call this the stairway to heaven, because of like how the mountains just like surround you and they're so tall. Yeah, it really is a beautiful, very special, energetically, like just like gets you kind of feeling things, you know?
So how have you changed from being in Vancouver to now way up north, surrounded by a culture and by people that, like you said, are just like, you just do it, you get it done, you figure it out, all those different things. How have you evolved now living there for 5 years?
Yeah, definitely a very different person. I wear a lot of plaid now.
Yeah,
No,
very Canadian of you. Well done.
Yeah, I like
I'm
definitely
from Saskatchewan, so
so you know.
tons of plaid. I know. I'm very aware. Yeah, that, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think I have become that independent, kind of hardier version of myself that I wanted to become. I don't know if I imagined all the things that it would take to make me that person. Like I've had some very unique hardships here, like
It's best that way that you don't know. It's
yeah,
usually
you're like
best. Yeah.
you're so
You would be like,
unprepared.
no, if you knew ahead of time. It's
First couple winters were really hard because I didn't have a winter vehicle. Like I moved up here in a Volkswagen Beetle, and I threw some like studded tires on the first.
The dashboard was doing very little to help you out there. The flower probably froze.
The Gerber Daisy didn't make it.
I was so naive. Yeah, so I got some studded tires the first season, and like I'd just be getting like stuck everywhere, and I'd have to, and I didn't really have any friends, so I would have to rely on like the kindness of strangers that might be passing by on this desolate winter road kind of thing to help me out. So there were a lot of like those situations. I lived in a tiny home for a bit that was like not off grid, but it was like out of town. So there's like no cell service. The power goes out a lot. Like there's no snow plowing. So like, yeah, just weird little like things like that you wouldn't necessarily think you'd be subject to moving up here from the city. A, because you've probably never experienced it, and B, because like you just don't think these like weird, unique opportunities are going to happen for you. But yeah, like little things like that, or even just like making connections, like genuine connections with people. There's a lot of like transient people here. So the humility of like letting people into your life and then letting them go, and like having those like lifelong friends, like I feel like that's like emotional hardiness, if you will. Like it's not so much like, you know, toughing out the cold winters. It's more like toughen out the cold winters of your soul almost, like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, so little things like that I just like did not anticipate. And but I guess in some ways I did, because I signed up for like the adventure, like let's just go see what it's going to be like, and this is what it's like. So
You never fully prepare though. You know, it's like you sign
um,
up for that. You sign up knowing that you're doing the unknown and that you get a glimpse of it, but you never really know until you're fully immersed in it, right? And you're having that like mental and emotional experience, physical as well, right? All those different things. And you really do come out on the other side a very different person than you went in with. You will change, but you're like, oh, this is who I've introduced myself to as a new human in a certain way.
I feel like a very different person. Even just like I renovated my house. I would not have even thought 5 years ago that I would be not just capable, but like have the patience to do that myself. Like I just growing up watched my parents pay people to renovate the house, and that was just what you did. But
Yeah.
like there's not that many tradespeople that are like waiting around for jobs. Like everybody's got very good job security in the trades here, so a lot of times you got to like pick up that hammer yourself and just get her done, otherwise your roof's going to continue to leak or whatever. Right, and it's like
Yeah.
these are your
How
options.
how have you found with friends back home? Because growing up in Vancouver, I'm assuming a lot of your friends have stayed in the city or surrounding city. When you come home, or I guess maybe even if they do venture up to visit, how have you found that to be different in your relationships now with friends back home? Or have you noticed it being different in how you relate to your friends?
I don't think it's like hard for me to relate to them, but I think it's hard for them to relate to me a little bit, because I remember what it was like being them. And then I feel like they don't really like, they see my life and I tell them about it, but they don't understand because they're not here day to day. So I just find like I personally have a lot more peace now with like how I run my life. And it's something that I think was definitely the driving force to why I left the city. Was I just didn't have that sense of peace anymore. And I see that a lot in my friends. Like I feel like they live these like super busy lives, and they are always like on the go, and they complain about it, but they don't really have an understanding of like why they're like that. And it's not really my place to tell them. I think it's something that you need to just discover on your own. But I definitely do see that, like it's an observation that whenever I go back to the city, the pace is very different. And I find myself getting flustered. Like after 3 days, I'm like ready to leave. I'm like, I can't do the traffic anymore, the lineups, the people everywhere. Like I don't know, maybe it's not a good thing. Maybe it does kind of make my like social anxiety regress or something, living up here a little bit. But it I just feel more peaceful like this. So to me, it's like, I have friends. I'm not lonely. I'm just living it a little differently, right? So
Well, it sounds like you're just so much more centered in who you are. Like every single breadcrumb you followed seems to have led you to exactly where you're supposed to be. And the closer that we get to that, and it's an ever evolving moving target, the closer that you get to maintaining that alignment, I think that that does provide so much more soulful peace to an individual. And it really has been your listening capacity that's garnered that for you in such this tremendous way. You kind of started the conversation off talking about, your mom and her ambitious spirit and her adventurous spirit. And through yourself, it's like this daughter that not only thrived in the city growing up, and then taking on motorcycle riding, and then adventure riding and traversing new trails, and then moving to a whole destination. I'm curious, what type of feedback do you get from family that has known you and seen you not just fulfill a little hint of adventurous spirit, but I would say somebody that decided to just go all fucking in?
I think given my like cultural background, it's definitely kind of hard for some of my family, especially in Iran, to understand my life. Like I live on my own. I don't have any family here. Like that in itself would be really unusual for somebody that's my age, like unmarried. And yeah, for my parents, I think that slowly started, like the understanding started to materialize once they realized I was just very genuinely happy being like this. And so I think they've told me they're very proud of me. And I think they are surprised by that, because I don't think I'm the person that they thought I would become. Like, they had all these visions of who they thought I would be, and I don't think any of that materialized. But I think the biggest thing that they see is that I'm happy. And that was kind of the end goal to moving to Canada, was that I could have a better life. And I feel like I've accomplished that to some extent. And like you said, it's a moving target. It's every day I got to wake up and decide that this is the life for me. And if it's not, that I have the power to change it. They definitely have opened up their mind to the realm of happiness being like a lot different than maybe like other people might perceive it to be for them.
Well done, mom and dad.
Right.
Because that's tough, especially, you know, like when you're making such huge sacrifices and taking such risks. And like every adult does that. Every person does that. We have their image in our, that movie reel, right? Of how things are going to look in any relationship, in anything. And just that, especially with one child, you don't have to spread it amongst siblings. You're just like, oh, it's just one movie they've got rocking.
Yeah.
And so for them to be so open, because it's so much easier said than done, but for them to completely be able to lean into, or very much lean into that, like, you're happy, you're just happy. It's not the story of like what happens when you move to, you know, Canada and the opportunity. Yeah, there's opportunity, but that just means that if you get to really explore what makes you happy. So it's so cool to hear that your parents really have been able to lean into that, what's most important at the end of the day.
Well, and I think in so many instances, you know, no matter what your like childhood looked like, I think for the most part, there's like those expectations or the checkbox list. I know this is something you and I talk about all the time, where it's like, this is the recipe for life. And I always call it like lifestyle TM 2.0, like get the picket fence, get this, da, da, da. And like, how many people do we know that are deeply unhappy because they've been pursuing something that they have been misled to think is a destination. And if you have this and that and the other, that you will be happy. And then what the hell happens? They end up in that space. And generally at that point, they've moved on and we'll get the 2-car garage and then we'll just fill it with more shit and then we'll get more stuff. And that's how we know a lot of people. I hate the term boomer because I feel bad because they've just gotten brutalized, but it's like
every generation has.
Definitely. I'm like, it'll be our turn.
Yeah. Millennials, they hate us. Forever. Yeah, we have Gen Z, like, they hate them. Everyone hates them.
How many like older adults do you know as well that are still deeply unhappy and searching? And it's because they were sold the same thing, that there was this recipe into life and there was one way to live it successfully, and that was it. And I think stories like yours, and really this is one thing that I love so much about the motorcycle community generally, and not to say just women, but like women who ride bikes at some point made a choice that was a little bit against the grain, because still we're the minority in the people on bikes. What are we at? 20%, forecast to be 25. Like we got a lot of places to go and it's happening and it's exciting. But I'm like, generally these are people that are like, nah, I'm going to do it my way. And I'm going to make little decisions that feel more like me and craft my life the way I feel that it should look, and not from a selfish standpoint, but like leaning into that knowing and that little voice. And that's not always the easy choice, because every single distraction is going to give you an excuse that you didn't have to do any of that. Every single one of them.
And just leaning into like the uncertainty of that too, like sitting with that feeling of like not being sure that this is the right move, and that people are not going to understand it, but ultimately knowing that you're the best decision maker for you, because only you know you, and only you know the things that you've been through and what you need out of that. I think just like really tuning into that voice, that inner voice, and listening to that person.
Fearlessness requires probably conquering the highest amounts of fear to get to that other side.
And it almost never looks like the right move on paper. Like I've noticed that in my own life, you know, and most people that take these big risks, that like on paper, they make absolutely no sense, little sense, or it seems like you're, you know, ruining everything that you've worked for, or you're sabotaging, or all those different things. But most of the time, it's that intuition that's saying, turn here, and you're like, really? Right now? It's like, yeah, turn here. And ultimately, whether it not, and it's not like it falls into place. Like you said, when you moved up there, like you didn't have the right car. You were out in the boonies a bit. You didn't have power at times. There was so much uncertainty even after the fact. And that's all part of it too. It's not going to just serve it up on, a silver platter. But my gosh, when you're giving the lessons that you're supposed to be learning from, you're getting those experiences that are for you because of the listening. And because, like you said, you only know you only know your story and the things that have, taken place that has led you there. That it's like, even the hard stuff, especially the hard stuff is the best gift ultimately.
Well, and I think you're so onto something too when you were talking about getting into the motorcycle marketing aspect. And I think it's cool now learning a little bit more under the hood of your story, because all those experiences are adding up to creating an opportunity that you certainly weren't pursuing out of the gate. But every single one of those skill sets has been pushing you here, and like your following has grown so organically because you're just building connections with people that are really, and again, I'm going to use the word authentic, and that is the only way that these platforms grow, is if you show up as yourself. This is me, this is who I am, because people can see the bullshit. Like their bullshit meters are very good and they don't connect on that way. And what I'm excited for you so much is because you're exactly nailing it. Like this market and segment is only going to continue to grow. You have established a voice in this space, and it marries all the most beautiful parts of you, who you are, that you decided to embrace later in life, saying, yes, this is me and this feels where I'm most at peace. No wrong can go with that. Like your story is going to be really different now to a year from now. I guarantee it.
I hope so. Yeah, I definitely hope I'm not in this like, I need to make a change and I still haven't made the change space. So yeah, I feel
I don't think you're built that way.
No,
Not
I
anymore.
don't.
I don't think you could if you wanted to.
Yeah,
Because you're just not wired that way, whether you were at all ever or not. Like I think, I work in early childhood development. And so those exposures to witnessing and being a part of watching firsthand people take action in and around the discomfort or the like, I feel as though you were hardwired from the get-go to, in many ways, to take that. But everything that you've been doing for the last 8 years, you might still have some uncertainty, but I don't think you're even wired or built anymore in any capacity to just sit and just wonder and ruminate and not take action. I don't think it's even part of you in any capacity. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Yeah, no, I definitely think like when I look back on those times that I did make those big changes, I feel like a lot of the times I had to hit rock bottom before that happened, and that realization of like, I have nothing to lose now. Whereas now I'm a lot braver having had those experiences, knowing that no, you don't have to hit rock bottom. You can make a change before that happens, and then you've got a leg up, right? So yeah.
You're listening to the whispers and the nudges. You're not needing to get like knocked right off the cliff.
Totally.
I got knocked off a cliff at the end of the summer. So I relate to this very much.
Yeah, it happens, right? Like that's life.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just gotta kind of like pick up where you are and be like, we can only take one step closer to like who I want to become today. And then I'm going to do that again tomorrow and show up for myself the next day. And I'm going to do that every day until I'm that person.
Well, I feel like this segued beautifully. And are you ready for this?
Oh, we haven't done this in a while. Motivation.
I love that.
Still
sounds just as great as last I remembered. So here's that.
So our motivation maintenance is a tool that people can put in their toolkit based on your life experience. It's like a little bit of life advice or a practice that you have used that we can take along for our life ride. So what would be yours?
So you gave some examples of this and I was like, I don't do any of these things, but that's okay. Maybe they will like it anyways. But so my like motivation maintenance tip of the day is basically just go outside and do it alone. Because I feel like that's what really helped me kind of build this like confidence, this like quiet confidence and like anything I go through, anything that happens, I can get myself out of it. I think being outside is such a natural thing for creatures that live on this planet, but human beings specifically. And we've been so far removed living in cities and stuff that we just don't crave that connection anymore. Like we've kind of lost touch with that. And so when I rediscovered that, I think it changed my life in very profound ways. And just like being okay with the idea of like just sitting under a tree, not feeling bored, but just like listening and like opening up all of your senses to everything that's happening around you, and like grounding yourself in the rhythms of nature, and realizing that you are just like one little tiny part of this whole huge cosmic field of energy. And yeah, just kind of like sitting with that feeling and letting it ground you and bring you back into like who you're meant to be. That's kind of my tip of the day. Go outside and
Oh God, I couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
That's an incredible, it's an incredible one.
It is interesting too. I like how you use the word the cravings for it, because that's something I talk about all the time, especially living in Vancouver now. Like I actually had a producer I worked with once who would look at me and he's like, "You haven't been in the trees." Like he would know because it would change me, and I was like, "Yeah, I got to get out there." Like you actually need it so much. And I think it's one of the things that helps me being a city dweller. I have this one, I will not say the exact spot because they're not on Airbnb or VRBO, and I just don't want anyone to take
fair enough
the spot. But it's like this lovely couple, and they have these off-grid cabins, and it's just on a forest road outside of Pemberton. And that place, I don't know what the energy is around it, but it's something, it speaks to me in this deep, deep way. And when I get overwhelmed, it's like mentally, if I can't necessarily be up there, it's like knowing that that place coexists in the same moment can also ground me in the chaos a little bit, where I'm like, that is there and I'm part of that. So there's so much power in what you said, because it's true. It is so easy here. Like even getting up this morning, I said to Lori, I was like, I've had a whole day. I got up, I did work emails, and then I walked the dog, and then I got all the gear ready to come over here. And you're just kind of like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But we kind of close out our conversation with a favorite little mantra or quote. It's our fuel stop. So what would be yours?
So I don't necessarily have like a famous quote or anything, but something that I always kind of keep in the back of my mind whenever I'm doing stuff is that the most important are the promises we keep to ourselves, because it's like I really value integrity, like personal integrity. I think it's really important to be like true and honest to yourself. And if you're not keeping promises to yourself, you're kind of setting yourself up for the expectation that other people won't keep promises to you. And it's just like not a very encouraging way to go about the world. Like you got to believe that like not only are you going to show up for you, but other people will too. Like not everybody, but the people that you choose are going to show up for you, and they're going to do that because they see that you show up for yourself and like you're just a person of high integrity. So yeah, just keep promises to yourself. It's really important for your mental health. Like when you make little mental notes that like I want to do this, or like I should do this, and you don't do those things, you're kind of like kicking your little inner child, and you're like, well, I just don't care about you, right? So it's really important to like keep those promises to yourself and follow through with whatever you want to do.
It's a fantastic one. So, well, first off, like a huge, huge, huge thank you for joining us this morning and taking that time out of, your life to talk with us and to share.
Ladies are lovely.
Yeah, and we'll be coming up on a motor trip to Terrace till we come up. But just so we'll be putting it out there as well. But like for people that are listening that want to follow your story and follow you and just see what you're up to and be inspired by the adventures that you're taking, where would they find you?
Yeah, I think Instagram. I try and like plug in a little bit of my daily life into my stories and stuff. But yeah, feel free to like DM me too. I'm always happy to like meet new people and just chat with them and maybe ride. What's
the handle?
G Namazi. So GNAMAZI.
That, my friends, is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your host, Chrissy Van, and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
Thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And in the meantime, tanks full and full throttle.